within the Republican Party of who exactly wants this job. Because regardless of who is sitting in the Speaker's office, regardless of who has the gavel, the problems remain the same. Uniting this conference is no easy task. And it's because Republicans have this razor-thin majority, and they have different factions within the party, and you have seen it on issue after issue, whether we're dealing with raising the debt limit, whether we're dealing with government funding and a deal on that. The party has deep divisions across the spectrum. And so it does raise the question of who will be able to unite the Republican Party. If today Jordan is successful, if he does become the Speaker of the House, he will certainly face the same exact challenge that Kevin McCarthy did with trying to unite his party. And of course, some Republicans will remind you here, oh, 4. Okay, so this is just coming in. Right now you have, here we go, 5. It looks like 5 Republicans now are not supporting Congressman Jim Jordan. So this is certainly defeating his bid to become the next Speaker of the House on this ballot. You see how quickly this comes in. I'm going back to what Jordan told me on his way to the floor, that he believes that tonight there will be a Speaker of the House, so we could see this go multiple rounds. And I'm just going to remind everyone that's watching, you may remember what happened back in January. It took 15 rounds for Kevin McCarthy to be elected as Speaker.
Do you think we're going that way? Do you think we're going to enter the Speaker, the day of, how do we describe that day? I don't know. We all didn't sleep for days, but could we see that happen again, where we're going to enter more than a dozen rounds of voting?
Everyone wants to avoid that. And yes, these votes are still coming in right now, but I'm struck, and I'm reminded by something that we saw during the voting of Kevin McCarthy, possibly for Speaker, where Jeffries had more support in his column than the Republican nominee. And that's something that we're seeing unfold right now as members continue to cast their votes. No one here wants this to go multiple rounds. Again, especially with the House at a complete standstill right now, with the crisis unfolding in Israel. The deadline to keep the government funded is now exactly 1 month away. And so there is an effort, there's a sense of urgency here on Capitol Hill to get this done. But again, that requires coming together, and Republicans will have to come together around their nominee, whoever that is, to become the next Speaker. But as of right now, I just want to be clear once again for our viewers, it looks like Jim Jordan at this point, he does not have the votes to become the next Speaker of the House on this ballot.
So Rick Klein, what do you think could happen here?
This is when members of Congress have to suddenly get very good at math, which is maybe not something they're necessarily good at or that we're good as journalists. But when you're looking at the magic number here, yes, it is clear on this ballot Jim Jordan is not going to get the votes. We heard earlier the name of Ken Buck called. He did not vote. Right now, no members of Congress have voted present. Ken Buck will get a chance to vote at the end of this, as do anyone else who misses their name or chose not to vote the first time around. But we talked earlier about voting present. That does bring down the threshold and at least hypothetically make it easier for Jim Jordan to become the Speaker with a lower number than 217. There is some danger there, though, because if too many Republicans do that, you could actually be electing Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat Speaker. He's got 212 members, I believe, in the room today. If all of them vote for him, it's possible that on this round of voting, Hakeem Jeffries gets more votes than Jim Jordan. That doesn't make him Speaker, though, unless he gets to that outright majority. So one of the things that they have to watch carefully, when we saw this happen back in January, where everyone thought that a present vote by Matt Gaetz was going to be enough, and it seemed like they miscalculated. There was some confusion and even almost a fight on the House floor as they realized the implications of some bad back-of-the-envelope math. But what's going to happen now is that a lot of these members are going to go back to the negotiations, go back to the discussions, figure out what it's going to take. The other factor to keep in mind, guys, is that members of Congress often will make an agreement, at least publicly or privately, to support a candidate on the first ballot or on the first 2 ballots. Sometimes, many times, that has an expiration date. And if it goes multiple ballots, they might see their votes come up for discussion, among others. Right now, there isn't any other name in nomination, but the Democrats have talked about potentially trying to empower the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, for a longer period of time to keep him with the gavel, with maybe expanded authorities. Those are the kind of conversations that will happen if this goes on a couple of ballots, because as Rachel has been reporting, there's no one in that chamber on the Republican side who wants to see this become a protracted standstill.
Well, we see 7 votes now, so Jim Jordan is not going to become Speaker of the House on this ballot. I actually want to bring in Barbara Comstock, who voted for Speaker as a member of Congress. And I want to ask you a couple of things, Barbara. We're a Republican from Virginia. And I saw a Republican congressman quoted today saying, Moderate Republicans always cave. It's a tale as old as time. That was the quote. And another quote that normal Republicans never fight back and MAGA Republicans never back down. Is that what's happening? That eventually, whatever happens on this ballot or the next one, we now see 8 against Jordan. He's not going to get it on this ballot. Eventually, he will.
Well, that really is the sad thing. I mean, that's to see, I'm happy certainly to see some of these moderates, a lot of the New Yorkers who still might be redistricted. So, they are in a precarious position. So you've had these Freedom Caucus guys, people like Matt Gaetz, who somebody told me was sitting there very smugly, confident that they'll win, been mocking the moderates as they caved. Hey, we knew they'd always cave. Nobody cares. And you've had this consistent bullying. Jordan was short 81 votes going into the weekend, and bullying by Trump, by Jim Jordan himself, by Sean Hannity and Fox News, and by the whole MAGA empire. And this just gives you, I think, what it would be like to have a Speaker Jordan. It wouldn't be legislating. It wouldn't be leading your team. It would be bullying your team. And that's not a leader. So I certainly hope these folks will hold, because it will be very precarious for those 18 Biden seats. But worse, it'll be bad for the country. It'll be bad for someone, 2 heartbeats, away from the presidency, to have somebody like this with no leadership capabilities and who will just be a pawn for Trump and whatever, the MAGA world tells him to do.
So do you think House Republicans could collapse into anarchy?
Again?
No, I think you can just turn around and go back to who's somebody here who can govern and genuinely bring people together, not bully. Steve Scalise didn't go to the floor. He made a choice not to sell off body parts to try and get the speakership, not to bully his colleagues, because he was somebody who worked with people. He was somebody who was a legislator. And now you have Jim Jordan saying, we're just going to stay here and we're going to keep bullying you. Well, they're flooding phones. Mario Diaz-Balart said, he's a tough Cuban. He knows what bullies are like. That's what his family came escaping a bully. Yeah. And, they're saying, that's not working on me. So I think leadership by bullying is not leadership. And it made me very sad to see some of my former colleagues cave to that type of bullying. And I certainly hope, now that we're up to 9, that you will see more of these, more of this in the second round, because there are some who aren't even beholden to Jordan in a second round. So maybe in a second round, there will be more who will say, adios, I didn't like the bullying in the first place. Let's go back to finding someone who will genuinely bring us together, not bully us.
Jacobs.
And that, I have to say, that speech by Aguilar, by Representative Aguilar, most Republicans had to have been nodding their head, because what he said is not unlike what you would have heard when I was in the caucus and Jim Jordan was there. Most of those things that he said about Jim Jordan hadn't been said by Republicans before. You
know what? Then let me follow up on that real quickly, if you don't mind. And Jay, I promise we're going to get to you. We're going to get to everybody on our panel here. Oh, by the way, do we know what the cheers are for?
Jeffries, yeah.
Got it. Jeffries voted for himself. But Barbara, to follow up, oh shoot, now I think I lost my train of thought. Oh yes, to follow up on what you said about Jim Jordan and the bullying, et cetera, your take on this. But you have you have a number of Republicans saying that he's changed, that he's no longer that way, that he's actually working toward unity here, and he's no longer the flame thrower that we were talking about. Are you not buying that? Do you not believe that he's changed his way?
That is a joke. Again, those are people who are scared of him, scared of the Trump, scared of MAGA, scared of a primary opponent. There has been nothing about Jim Jordan that has changed. And look at his inability to lead. Those 8 members who didn't come through for Kevin McCarthy. If he had any leadership skill, he would have gotten those 8 members over, or at least enough of them, for Kevin McCarthy. Yet he didn't. So this, he doesn't have that capability. He's never passed a bill in 16 years. His hearings as Judiciary Chairman were a disaster, according to who? Matt Gaetz. So listen, this has not been somebody, as Pete Aguilar accurately said, who's been a success as a member of Congress. He's somebody who's just carried water for Donald Trump. That's where he came to, recognition. And before that, as John Boehner said, he was a legislative terrorist who never cared about legislating. And he has not changed. He hasn't passed bills in the past few years. He just came to prominence because he, he was the insurrectionist insider. He would have Ken Buck's vote if he would have just admitted that Trump lost. That's how tied at the hip he is to the election denying and to Donald Trump. He wouldn't, to get that vote, he wouldn't just admit what we all know is true. That's how down the rabbit hole he is to conspiracies.
Well, and as you pointed out,
whatever Trump would ask him to do, he would do. And you saw him run away from the camera today when somebody asked him, why won't you just admit that Trump lost? And he just ran away into the elevator, because they'll never admit that.
Yeah. And, well, as you point out, most Republicans just nod their head, even though they feel differently. If most Republicans voted as they nod their heads, Trump would have been convicted in 2021 for the assault on the Capitol, undoubtedly. But let me go back to Jay O'Brien. Jay, we're now looking at 11 votes against Jim Jordan. How do you read that number? Is it dam breaking here? Is this damaging him? Or was this expected that it would take a few rounds? They're going to win enough of those guys over, men and women over.
Well, I mean, our whip count, our tentative whip count was 10 guys. And so we even have 2 more now than what we had accounted for last night.
Wow.
The question becomes, who flips against Jim Jordan? I'll give you a good example. So Kay Granger, who is the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, a prominent Republican, she voted against Jim Jordan. So when you talk about the dam breaking, you've got some prominent names against Jim Jordan. One who's been consistently against Jim Jordan, but a name that's consistently coming up and someone who carries a lot of weight in the House Republican Conference is Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida. He voted against Jim Jordan. He voted, let me look on my notes here, for Steve Scalise, kind of a protest vote. Even Anthony D'Esposito, one of those New Yorkers who's in kind of a tough district, as the congressman was just talking about, he voted for Lee Zeldin to get a protest vote against Jim Jordan. And so we've heard of 2 different conversations really go on here at once on how to deal with these holdout votes. I can tell you from the Republicans I've talked to, from the Republicans our senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has also talked to, many got the sense even before this vote that if this vote was going to be a failure, which it appears it is, again, we can't officially say it is until the vote is finished and everything gets tabulated, because you have a chance to change your vote at the end. But it appears Jordan's on track to lose. And if he does lose, Republicans were telling us that they would likely then go into conference, go into a meeting behind closed doors of Republicans and try to work out their differences. But as Rachel and I have been reporting all week long, we've stood outside of repeated meetings, weeks of meetings since McCarthy was ousted, of Republicans getting together behind closed doors, and they never work out their problems. We've seen lawmakers emerge from those meetings with more problems than when they walked in with. So can the conference really get behind Jim Jordan when they get together? This is a pretty big grouping of Republicans who have said no to Jim Jordan. It's going to be hard for him to whip 10 plus and get those back into his column. Again, because of the current math, because one Republican didn't show up because he had a family commitment, he could have only afforded to lose 3. So by that 4th vote, he was done. Now it's 13.
Let's bring Amanda Renteria into the fold here and talk about Democrats. You know, Democrats joined with, 8 Republicans to oust Kevin McCarthy. How do you see Democrats playing into all of this, Amanda?
Jordan. Really what Democrats have been talking about for a long time. So you are seeing folks talk about what is happening in the Republican Party, where is the leadership. you're in a campaign cycle already for many of these candidates, and particularly those moderate candidates who are saying, if I vote for this person, what is this going to mean for me down the road as I go to an election cycle? And if it just looks like Republican leadership is still in disarray, that is not good for their campaigns. That is not good for the people that they are representing. And so that's some of the worry here, is not just this moment in time, but really as these candidates look forward. And for Democrats looking at this, there's a real case to be made, which is, this is what happens when there is Republican leadership. And so do you have a case now to make to the voters at large to say, listen, we've got to have Democratic leadership in the House of Representatives, in Congress, in order to move things forward, because the example of what we are seeing now, particularly at this critical moment, not only for this country, but the world at large. And so you can see that Republicans are taking a look at this, trying to speak about their own leadership in this moment. And that's going to be likely the case going forward. And so I think more and more you're going to see some of these individual 13 different people come out and say perhaps what they need to hear in order to go back to their districts and with a straight face say, this is why I voted for whomever that next candidate is. That's a weird space to be, because usually people want you talking about kitchen table issues. But now every Republican member is going to be forced to talk about what happened here, what's going on with leadership. And so Democrats are really staying out of the way, trying to talk about what the kitchen table issues as they can, and really showcasing leadership right now. That's why you saw everyone stand up for Jeffries, and why you're really seeing a consolidation within the Democratic Party, talking about what leadership looks like and means for the Democratic Party.
Jeffries.
They're doing all that, no question, but admit it, Amanda, they're enjoying this. Y'all are enjoying this too, right? I mean, this is a spectacle of disarray in the party that you oppose. It's got to be a little bit.
I think,
and showing that this party
would
can't
say to
even
that is-
govern.
Jeffries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard right now given the world events, but for a lot of people who go to Congress and try and get something done, it is incredibly frustrating to be in a moment where you're talking about procedures and you're counting votes for leadership. This is not usually why people run. This is not what you tell your voters in your district. And it is true that at the end of the day, it's who can speak to those kitchen table issues better. And in that sense, while Democrats can say Republicans aren't moving and here's where we are, we're stuck, they also can't deliver on those promises they also made when they ran for Congress. And so on the one hand, it is a juxtaposition of what leadership looks like in one area or the other. But looking down the road, when you're talking to voters again, the question's still going to be, what have you done? And when things are as stuck as they are, nobody wins.
You know, Barbara said that Jim Jordan is just a bully. Do you agree with that? What's your take?
Jordan.
I think he has made his career on throwing bombs, on messaging, not on getting things done. And there's a real difference when you see members of Congress who are focused on what is the narrative and what is the messaging, and you look at congressmen who are working on what is getting done. And the reason those two make a difference is because when you are actually working on legislation to get it through, you know you have to work across the aisle. You know you have to think about different districts when you're trying to put legislation and a bill together. And so the fact that Jordan doesn't come from that makes it very difficult to have real relationships about what it means for this kind of speaker to be at the forefront. And so in the case, so what does he have to go with? He has to go with narratives. That's what he is known for. And so it doesn't surprise me that that is the leverage and tactic that he happens to use, because it's never been for him about what are you going to pass.
Well, the narrative is going against him right now. Let's go back to Rachel Scott, who along with Jay O'Brien's been in the hallways during this whole couple of weeks of what's happening inside the Republican Party in the House. Rachel, 13 votes now against Jim Jordan. Are you surprised? How do you read what's happening?
There are some on this list that I had my eye on. For instance, Congresswoman Jen Kiggin. She actually voted for McCarthy on this ballot. She's one of those who we spoke as Republicans were meeting behind closed doors, she's from a very vulnerable district, and she told me that she's concerned that all of this could backfire politically, that having all of this dysfunction and chaos and infighting within the Republican Party could actually do damage to someone like her when she's looking to get reelected because of how Democrats will look to paint this picture in the elections going forward. She was increasingly worried about that. She's also looking to get back to work, saying that there's the crisis in Israel unfolding. They need to work on getting a deal to keep the government funded. And so she was furious that all of this was going on. And so today she's backing McCarthy. So yes, we are seeing more Republicans not support Jordan than that was originally on our list. And one thing that we're going to want to keep our eye on is obviously after this ends, if right now he is on track to lose this vote for Speaker of the House, what happens next? Remember that it was the conversations after McCarthy lost that eventually got him in trouble. You're seeing some applause there because Pelosi just voted, and so you see Democratic colleagues applauding Pelosi. But remember that McCarthy made promises to win over those holdouts back in January. That's what landed him in trouble, in addition to working with Democrats to keep the government funded. And so it's unclear if Jim Jordan can convince any of these holdouts, the ones that are in this column of other 13 that are not supporting him, to come on board. But he has to be very careful about what he's making clear to them and what he's promising to get them to support him.
Well, when you think of all the international and domestic crises that are taking place right now, Barbara Comstock, listening just to all the feedback on both sides about Jim Jordan not even able to get a piece of legislation through. What's the feeling among the party that you're getting right now?
Well, I was going to say, you know, with Jen Kiggins in Virginia, she's from the part of Virginia down in the Virginia Beach area that represents the military. She herself is military nurse, you know, a pilot. And so she has big concerns about, you know, how that part of the budget is going to be addressed. Jim Jordan has never been somebody who is concerned about the military budget. I can tell you from having been in the caucus, you know, he was not somebody who was concerned if the budget was cut in that area. So that's why you did have a lot of the members who had that type of concern with Jim. He's an isolationist. He has never had any interest in foreign affairs. So the idea of having somebody as a speaker at this time when the world is in turmoil, somebody who does not have that type of depth in foreign affairs, certainly should give people pause. I am thrilled to see somebody like Kay Granger, who has such, you know, who is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, who knows that we need to be funding, you know, Israel at this time, funding Ukraine, who is, you know, a get-her-done strong woman who was a surprise on this list, as well as, you know, other, I think it was Lori Chavez early on also. So great to see some of these women stand up. Jim Jordan never was very, I can tell you, he always sat in a little corner of the, you know, on the floor with all the guys. Not somebody who was known to have relationships with many of the women in the caucus.
That's a solid burn.
Smoking cigars, the boots up on the desk.
Yeah, the girls had cooties.
Jordan.
Well, it's a new day, let me tell you, when we see especially the change with regard to women representatives. You know, we have a woman vice president. We had, I mean, oh, was that George Santos?
Yes, he's a Jim Jordan voter, yeah.
Okay, so, and he kept things calm versus his huge meltdown down the hallways this past week, which, trying to remember, Rachel, Jay, which one caught Santos totally out of control in the hallways today? It was Jay. Yeah, let's listen to who are they
14
cheering?
votes now against Jim Jordan. Democrats, Republicans cheering, it looks like, there. Let's go back in, listen to the culmination of this vote.
Schakowsky. Jeffries. Schiff. Jeffries. Schneider. Jeffries. Skolton. Jeffries. Schreier. Jeffries. Schweikert. Jordan. Austin Scott. Jordan. David Scott. Jeffries. Scott of Virginia. Jeffries. Self. Jordan. Sessions. Jordan. Sewell. Jeffries. Sherman. Jeffries. Sherrill. Jeffries. Simpson. Scalise. Slotkin. Jeffries. Smith of Missouri. Jordan. Smith of Nebraska. Jordan. Smith of New Jersey. Jordan. Smith of Washington. Jeffries. Smucker. Jordan. Sorensen. Jeffries. Soto. Jeffries. Spanberger. Jeffries. Sparts. Sparts. Stansbury. Jeffries. Stanton. Jeffries. Stauber. Jordan. Steele. Jordan. Stefanik. Jordan. Style. Jordan. Stubbe. Jordan. Stevens. Jeffries. Strickland. Jeffries. Strong. Jordan. Swalwell. Jeffries. Sykes. Jeffries. Takano. Jeffries. Tenney. Jordan. Tanadar. Jeffries. Thompson of California. Jeffries. Thompson of Mississippi. Jeffries. Thompson of Pennsylvania. Jordan. Tiffany. Jordan. Timmons. Jordan. Titus. Jeffries. Talib. Jeffries. Takuda. Jeffries. Tonko. Jeffries. Torres of California. Jeffries. Torres of New York. Jeffries. Trahan. Jeffries. Trone. Jeffries. Turner. Jordan. Underwood. Jeffries. Valadeo. Jordan. Van Drew. Jordan. Van Dyne. Jordan. Van Orden. Jordan. Vargas. Jeffries. Vasquez. Jeffries. VC. Jeffries. Velasquez. Jeffries. Wagner. Jordan. Wahlberg. Jordan. Waltz. Jordan. Wasserman Schultz. Jeffries. Waters.
Versus an insurrection.
Jeffries. Watson Coleman. Jeffries. Weber of Texas.
Jim Jordan.
Jordan. Webster of Florida. Jordan. Winstrup. Jordan. Westerman. Jordan. Wexton. Jeffries. Wild. Jeffries. Williams of Georgia.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Williams of New York. Jordan. Williams of Texas. Jordan. Wilson of Florida. Jeffries. Wilson of South Carolina. Jordan. Whitman. Jordan. Womack. Scalise. Yacom. Jordan. Zinke.
James Daniel Jordan of Ohio.
Jordan.
All right, so I have 199 to 211.
Step on the talent results there. Keep us honest.
The House will come to order. The reading clerk will now call the names of the members who did not answer the first call of the roll.
Bilirakis.
Say it twice.
Bilirakis. Buck. Emmer.
Cardenas.
Cardenas. Jeffries.
All right, let me get to one more on that one. We have Mr. James.
James. Cole.
We have Mr. Joyce of Ohio.
Joyce of Ohio. Jordan. LaMalfa. LaMalfa. McCarthy. Sparks. Massey.
All right, so we have 212 to 200, and then we have 6 for McCarthy, we have 3 for Zeldin, we have 7 for Scalise, we have 1 for Mike Garcia of California, 1 for Amber, 1 for
Well, Jay O'Brien, this is definitely going in a direction we didn't expect.
20 votes.
Yeah. Yeah, if you guys can hear me. So here's the deal. So obviously 20 Republicans voted for someone other than Jim Jordan. Right towards the end there, what you heard were the Republicans who were not in the chamber when their name was called coming back in and casting their vote. One was John James, who casted a vote for, I've got to double check who John James casted a vote for, actually. The other was Ken Buck, who wasn't in the chamber. Remember, you and I, Terry, were remarking on how the fact Ken Buck was not in the chamber. He cast a vote for Tom Emmer, who's currently the #3 Republican in the House. There's been scuttlebutt that Tom Emmer might jump into the Speaker's race, but nothing confirmed. And certainly Tom Emmer cast his own vote for Jim Jordan, has been staunchly behind Jordan in his position as the #3 Republican in the House. But the reality here, the thing to take away at this hour, is that right now Jim Jordan has had more Republican defections than Kevin McCarthy had in his first 2 rounds of trying to be the Speaker of the House. 19 Republicans defected against McCarthy on his first 2 rounds of balloting, and then it ticked up to 20 Republicans in McCarthy's 3rd round of balloting. Remember, it took Kevin McCarthy 15 rounds of voting to become the Speaker of the House. So this is a significant blow for Jim Jordan. Overnight, after Republicans met behind closed doors last night, we were tracking, based on the Republicans we spoke to in the hallway as they emerged from that closed door meeting, about 10 Republicans who said that they wouldn't vote for Jim Jordan. 20 Republicans are actually the ones who voted for someone other than Jim Jordan here on the floor. So that's a number that not everybody was bracing for. Certainly, the thought if 10 Republicans voted against Jim Jordan, that would be a pretty significant blow. 20 Republicans is an even bigger blow, particularly because there was... sorry, go ahead, Terry.
No, go.
Particularly, there was one Republican of Florida, who had a family commitment, and so he's at a funeral. He's coming back, and he'll be in a position to vote at 6 o'clock tonight. But that means, because that Republican wasn't there and voted, it lowered the threshold for however many votes Jordan could lose, because you need a majority of the votes cast. And so if you don't have a Republican in the room, it means you can only afford to lose less Republicans than you did before. Previously, Jordan could only afford to lose 4 Republicans. With that absence, he could only afford to lose 3 Republicans, and he lost 20. So if you look at how significant that number is compared to the Republicans that Jim Jordan could afford to lose, the 3, that puts him in a tough position. Now we're waiting to see exactly what Jim Jordan does. It's really his call as the Speaker nominee as to what happens next. Do we go into another round of voting, or do they recess and get all these Republicans behind closed doors, as some of my sources and Rachel Scott's sources had predicted, and try to hammer out their differences? But certainly, if you're Jim Jordan, this is not the place that you wanted to be in on your first round of balloting.
Rick Klein, 20 votes there, 20 votes not going with Jim Jordan. And also, rejecting the choice of their presidential frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, and Sean Hannity, the king of MAGA media, you might say. Is this a substantial revolt, or is it some kind of internal House Republican thing that's happening? Is something happening to the Republican Party in general, or are we seeing drama on the House floor that is more about that?
It's a lot bigger than the House floor, Terry. And another piece of perspective, it took only 8 Republicans joining with all the Democrats 2 weeks ago to oust McCarthy. The fact that more than twice as many Republicans are now saying they don't like that successor to McCarthy, the person that McCarthy has endorsed, the person that Trump has endorsed, the person that conservative media has been basically browbeating Republicans to support, talks to you a little bit and tells you something significant about how big these divisions are. Look, when Matt Gaetz led that revolt on the House floor a couple of weeks ago, he didn't have a backup plan, and it has now become obvious what that means and the consequences of that. They've now cycled through 2 different choices, first in Steve Scalise and now with Jim Jordan, without having the support, and they are back to exactly the kind of spectacle they were trying to avoid. And I'll tell you, Terry, that first vote might have been a bit of an easier one for Jim Jordan, because there was coming into this the perception of momentum, the perception that we talked about earlier. You don't want to be the last one on that train. You don't want to be the last person holding out your support. And instead, you saw, as this vote went on, a mini version of an opening of the floodgates, where a bunch of members of Congress felt like they were free to vote their conscience, vote their minds on this. You had a number of members from New York who voted for Lee Zeldin, a former member of Congress. You had votes for Steve Scalise. You had votes for old guard members of Congress like Congressman Tom Cole and Tom Emmer, someone that might still emerge. It was all over the place. And it's not like they're even now offering an alternative. But the idea of this first vote, it could have been the best chance that Jordan had. We'll see what happens next, because there's going to have to be a lot of conversations. But it was easier for me to see a first vote where you're close and a second vote where you get over the line than it is to see how you overcome this many no votes. Those are members of Congress that are on the record saying they don't think Jim Jordan should be the Speaker of the House, that now have to be brought, once they're already on the record, back into the fold. That is a tall order for Jordan and his allies.
Sounds like it. Rick, just quickly, you mentioned that it's almost as if you could feel a mini dam breaking, as you said. But that's actually an alphabetical accident, isn't it? That there were people at the front of the alphabet who stiffened the spines of people in the M's and the P's and the T's. I mean, what if they'd all been packed at the end? You might have had fewer votes against Jordan. You might have had a better shot.
Yeah, and they're all going to be alphabetical. It would be fun if they kind of alternated and started at the back of the alphabet, but that's what we're going to see. And you're right, some of it is an accident of the alphabet, but other pieces you saw people like Ken Buck, like John James, like Victoria Spartz wait till the end. That might be strategic. They might be looking where they're parking their vote. And keep in mind, if you vote present, you're lowering the threshold. But as I mentioned earlier, you're potentially lowering the threshold and making it easier for the Democrats to get their choice. That's what Republicans truly want to avoid. As it is, Hakeem Jeffries on paper is the choice of a dozen more members than the Republican choice, even though the Republicans hold the majority. But that's meaningless until you get an outright majority of those present voting.
So when we start talking about strategy, Barbara Comstock, right after, right at the end there, we saw the huddle. We said, okay, check out that huddle. And Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan were talking. There were a number of other gentlemen in the group there, but they immediately started talking. So are they in the huddle to figure out the next play here? Are they strategizing here? Do you think that was, surprise, shock, or part of the momentum they're trying to create in some way?
Well, it was a surprise. I think what I've heard, from people just, texting and all that, they were surprised by this because they thought they had bullied these people into submission, I think. And a lot of these members are in those swing seats. And why this is a good vote for them is a lot of these members are going to be stuck with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, probably, right? So they can go home now and say, listen, I'm my own person. I may get stuck with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, but I voted against Jim Jordan, and I did what was right for my district because I knew, say, all these New York guys, I didn't vote for Jim Jordan because he's a guy who always votes to cut all these budgets, had terrible votes, who wouldn't be good for Ukraine or for these other things that I think are important, and I voted against him. So they can talk about their independent streaks and vote, say, hey, when I had a choice to vote for Speaker, I didn't pick that guy. They can't pick who's the nominee of their party necessarily, but they can pick for Speaker. and this is their chance to make an independent vote, and this is a good vote for them. So trying to get them back on board, sure, because the Democrats, the Democrat campaign committee had already said what they were going to do to these guys if they voted for Jim Jordan. And you heard Pete Aguilar talk about all that horrible lineup of Jim Jordan's positions. Now they can say, that's not me, have nothing to do with that guy.
Let's listen in.
Has received 200 votes. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212 votes. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 6 votes. Lee Zeldin of the state of New York has received 3. The Honorable Steve Scalise of the state of Louisiana has received 7. The Honorable Mike Garcia of the state of California has received 1. The Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. The Honorable Tom Cole of the state of Oklahoma has received 1. The Honorable Thomas Massey of the state of Kentucky has received 1. No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess subject to the call of the chair.
There you go. Didn't happen. The House is still in recess, and the United States of America does not have a functioning legislature because the House of Representatives needs a Speaker of the House in order to pass anything.
And it looks like Ohio Rep. Jim Jordan, who was the elected nominee behind closed doors last week, was in a bit of shock. And you saw sort of the disarray there. He, Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker that was ousted, chatting in a huddle. What do they do next? Well, we know we're going to have to go to another vote. The question is, how many rounds are we now going to encounter?
And who, right? I mean, 20 votes against Jim Jordan is a lot more than our reporters, who are the best in the business, were expecting. They thought, there were 10 or so outstanding, and maybe he could swing just enough to get across the line. But 20? That's a fair distance to go to secure the speakership on the next ballot. But look, anything can happen, as we know, with this drama that, as Barbara Comstock pointed out, really since Matt Gaetz decided to rally the extreme right and rally the rebellion against Kevin McCarthy. And McCarthy had handed him the weapon to do it, with just one person could call for a recall vote of the Speaker to vacate the chair of the Speaker without a plan B, as Barbara pointed out. No real plan for what would come next. Here we are more than 2 weeks later.
So, Amanda Renteria, how are Dems reacting? Barbara says she's texting with fellow Republicans. What do Dems think about what just happened?
Well, no one's really surprised. I think everyone knew that this vote was going to be what it was. And so no one's really surprised. The only question is, now what? Are we really going to go back to Jordan again? Or are you going to see actually Republican Party come and look at a different kind of leader? Is this too much to mount? Of course, Democrats don't really have an influence here, right? I mean, there isn't that kind of relationship yet, especially considering who some of the candidates have been for Speaker. And so what you're going to see from Democrats is take a step back and once again talk about the juxtaposition of Democratic leadership versus Republican leadership. And once again, we don't have a leader in this very important moment for our country. And so that's where Dems are, wondering what's going to happen. And again, showing up and trying to really show the difference. So I am hopeful, though, that we had to go through this first step. Republicans had to figure out where the chips fell. They know now. And now the next question is going to be, can we actually get closer and closer? 20 seems insurmountable. Certainly not so much so that Republicans are looking to work with Democrats quite yet on the Unity Caucus or all the different things that Jeff Briggs is trying to do. But listen, this was the first step everyone knew they had to go through. I think there's not a lot of Democrats who are surprised at that 20 number, though.
Well, there they are. They're going to have to regroup and huddle up again. And I'm going to go to Rick. Is Rick around? Rick Klein? Yep. All right. So, Rick, let me ask you, picking up with what Amanda said, is this, I guess this is good news for Democrats. In your experience, does this kind of internal chaos, fighting in the House of in the Congress. Do you think voters are going to remember that?
Well, it's not a good look. I think it depends on how it ends and not the middle of it. It's the same way that the 15 votes were a distant memory in the McCarthy leadership battle until suddenly it was very relevant in the ouster. Look, when we talk about how voters are likely to react to this, keep in mind we're about a month away from another potential government shutdown. That might sting. That might leave a mark. But a lot of things are going to happen over the next year. I think the most relevant takeaway and what's made a lot of Republicans that I've talked to in the last couple of weeks nervous is that Republicans had an opportunity here. They won the House of Representatives. They were trying to show leadership in taking that majority that they won and hoping to preserve it and hoping to bring further gains. And the fear among many Republicans is they squandered it. And squandered it for what? Squandered it for the views of a small, extreme minority in their own conference. 8 members ultimately voting with all the Democrats to oust Kevin McCarthy. And now they're in a situation where no one can really do better than that. In fact, Jim Jordan is doing substantially worse than McCarthy ever did at his low points in any of the balloting. So it's taken them backwards in terms of party unity. And look, Republicans do still control the House of Representatives. I think they're adamant that they're not going to surrender the gavel over to the Democrats, but they have to show that they can get their own acts together, and Democrats aren't really prone to help them in a way that helps Republicans. There might be, though, some discussions about ways to extend the powers of the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, with certain guardrails that Democrats would be able to dictate. That might be a kind of short to medium-term solution. As of now, with this recess on the floor, there's no immediate plan for a second vote. I think because Republicans recognize that they don't really have a way out of this. I think the biggest fear, if you're McCarthy right now, is you might do worse next time. There were people that might be more free to vote against him once it's clear that he doesn't have the support. And the precedent set a couple of weeks ago that gives just that small group of Republicans so much power makes it so tough to come to any kind of a consensus in a narrowly divided House.
Rick Klein.
Yeah, no, I was going to say there's so much uncertainty right now that we really can't predict how long this is going to go, how far this is going to go. But we do know that this is chaotic. It was in many ways surprising, at least for the Jim Jordan camp. And we're going to keep going. They're on recess now.
Look at the House floor. Just minutes ago, it was crowded with members and with drama, and now it's kind of forlorn and empty and leaderless still. That's the story.
And we're sticking to it. We're going to take a quick break. We have a lot more news at the top of the hour. Don't go far.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine, close to the front line.
ABC News Live, America's #1 stream. ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Give it to me. Give it to me.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is the King Road Killings. The full series is out now. Listen to every episode wherever you get your podcasts.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war. The worst attack in 50 years.
We've seen tank after tank pouring into this area.
Bullet holes all up the wall.
Within minutes, the air raid sirens going off.
You can hear the sound of an explosion.
We are pinned down here.
Tonight, Israel waging a fierce bombardment of Gaza.
The Israel-Hamas war. For non-stop live coverage, stream ABC News Live.
Reporting from southern Israel.
Reporting from the front lines.
Wherever the story is, we'll take you there.
ABC News Live.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi, Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City, getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights wherever you stream your news. Only on ABC News Live.
Everything is so fine. Little bit of sunshine. Some more, just a little bit. Breathing more, just a little bit. Smile a little more, and I'm into it. I've been running through this strange life. Pictures on my phone life. Everything is so fine. Little bit of sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Today on ABC News Live, Speaker Showdown, a live look at Capitol Hill right now. Congressman Jim Jordan so far does not have the votes to be the next Speaker of the House. 20 Republicans defected from Jordan, more than twice the number McCarthy lost when he was ousted as Speaker. Hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Moran. With the chaos in Congress comes as President Biden plans to visit Israel tomorrow in the wake of Hamas's brutal massacre of Israeli civilians. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tells reporters the president will focus on American solidarity with Israel before meeting with Arab leaders to focus on the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip.
We start on Capitol Hill, of course, with the House of Representatives finishing up its first round of voting for new Speaker. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan coming up short, as we mentioned, despite growing pressure by fellow Republicans. And with a ton of holdouts left.
Yeah, with a lot of holdouts, the House Judiciary Chairman and conservative firebrand Jim Jordan, he's going to need to work much harder to corral the 217 votes he will likely need to become Speaker. That depends on how many people are in the chamber. Let's go to ABC's Jay O'Brien. And Jay, you know, you've been covering this for a while now. What is Jim Jordan's play here?
Yeah, the question really that we're facing now, guys, is what happens next. As you said, the House is in recess. Jordan lost 20 votes. And by sources who were talking to me and talking to our Rachel Scott, the question was what would happen after this. We had talked to sources kind of all morning long who had said that they believe what would happen if Jim Jordan were to lose the first round of balloting, which he now has, is that they would call a conference meeting, a closed-door meeting of essentially all of the House Republicans in which Jordan would try to work on the holdout votes. We have yet to see a conference meeting called, but the expectation is that there will be one today because Republicans then may want to return back to vote this evening when they get one more Republican who was out for a family emergency back to the floor and their numbers grow ever so slightly. That would be helpful to Jim Jordan because then he could only afford to lose 4 votes as opposed to 3, but he lost 20, guys.
So let's talk about that total of 20 Republicans getting in the way here, shall we say. So why even bring a vote to the floor?
Yeah, well, that's the question. And Jim Jordan now has his opposition essentially on the record. He's got 20 who have said they don't want to vote for him, but there's an ongoing pressure campaign on those 20. The question then becomes if that outside and internal pressure really does work, guys, for the next ballot.
Well, there's strength in numbers. There's 20 of them now. It's not like there's 4 holdouts, 5 holdouts that you can really muscle. There's 20 of them. That's going to be a problem for him. And it also indicates that one of the key skills the Speaker has to have is to be able to count votes. And maybe he wasn't. Yeah. So if the number of, 55 Republicans or something like that did not support him in the original ballot, what happens with that? They said they'd never vote for Jordan, so he's managed to slice 35 votes out of that, it looks like. What concessions has he been making? What has he got to trade?
Well, that's the open question. That's the question, frankly, we've heard from a lot of Republicans. Is remember, Kevin McCarthy did a lot of horse trading to become the Speaker. It took him 15 rounds. He doled out some committee assignments, but those committee assignments are obviously already assigned. He made significant changes to the House Republican rules. He made it easier to oust him as Speaker of the House. He lowered that threshold to 1. But the reality is those rule changes have been made. So what Jim Jordan has to trade with versus what Kevin McCarthy had to trade with is much less. And so the question becomes, how can Jim Jordan move some of these Republicans? We've heard from some Republicans who say they don't like his stance in the 2020 election, not acknowledging President Biden's win. He could potentially move in that direction, but each of these 20 different holdouts have a different thing they want from Jim Jordan, and the math is very complicated for him at this juncture.
So now let's talk about the Dems and how they're seeing this, what that means for them, and what's their strategy.
Well, the Democrats are going to vote against Jim Jordan at every turn. We've heard from some Democrats of the need for a compromise candidate, but Republicans are not going to bite on that. At least that's what they're saying at this juncture. So Democrats are going to continue to really take advantage of this, guys, and use it to bash the possibility of a speakership from Jim Jordan.
All right, Joe O'Brien, standing by in Capitol Hill. You got a long day ahead of you. Thanks very much. For more on this, let's bring in our powerhouse political teams. ABC News Political Director Rick Klein and ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper joins us now. So, Rick, let's talk the big picture here. What do House Republicans do next? How do they get themselves out of a bind that they've really been in since January, that now, you know, that is the label on House Republicans, certainly, which is that they cannot get their act together. How do they get out of this?
Well, in the immediate term, they have to make a choice. Do they try for another House vote, hope that they can twist enough arms to get that number of holdouts down significantly enough that you're moving in the right direction, or if not electing Jim Jordan Speaker overall? Do you try to draft another candidate, seeing if someone else, as yet unnamed, could potentially unify the party? Or do you look for some kind of an exit ramp that allows the business of the House to continue under a more permanent basis with that Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, who can be empowered by a full vote of the House to have additional authorities? It might take some cooperation, though, from Democrats. I think in the bigger picture, to zoom out for a second, the Republicans have shown they cannot, at this stage, govern their own majority in the House of Representatives, and that has real ramifications for the unfolding crises in Israel as well as Ukraine, where there's big funding issues that will be at stake soon, government funding overall about a month from now, the big issues that are on the Republican agenda around border security, around potential impeachment of Joe Biden, all effectively shelved for the time being, and any other world or national crisis, there is not an effective ability to govern around it because 2 weeks in, the Republicans have basically gone backwards. They went from having 8 members who joined with the Democrats to oust McCarthy 2 weeks ago to now having 20 saying they don't like the choice that was put forward by a majority of their colleagues as a replacement.
My goodness.
And Avery, there is so much going on right now. The war in Israel, the war in Ukraine. You've got the deadline for the government shutdown. I mean, crisis and so many various crises, you know, internationally and globally. So if indeed Jordan prevails here and becomes Speaker, what's that going to look like?
Right. I do think a Jordan speakership could be a boon to far-right agenda items. But if the part of the Republican Party that has inflicted this chaos on the chamber continues to have sway, it might render the House still paralyzed and unable to get the work of the people done. Like you mentioned, the U.S. is really confronting some major issues as basic as funding the government, but as urgent as dealing with the next steps in the Israel-Hamas war. And so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It sure will. And it is paralyzing the American legislature. The House of Representatives needs to be included in, obviously, in any law or bill that gets passed and cannot act. So, Rick, turn to the Democratic side of the ledger here. What do they do with this?
Well, almost lost in this is that every single Democrat showed up and voted for Hakeem Jeffries. It's hard to bring party unity, as I think the Republicans are demonstrating in real time. All 212 of them stuck together. They have quietly floated a couple of different options if there are willing Republican participants. There's a possibility that a small number of Democrats work with all of the Republicans to empower a House Speaker. Remember, you just have to get 217 votes. It doesn't matter where they come from. Certainly, if you're just looking at this as an outsider, there's lots of Democrats that could potentially be in play. Functionally speaking, though, that's very unlikely because of the unity we're seeing right now. More likely is that Democrats, if they are brought into the equation, and it's going to have to be Republicans inviting them in. The Democrats can't force themselves on the majority party. But if they're invited in, you can imagine them negotiating some kind of a deal that empowers them under a temporary power-sharing arrangement with a pro tem speaker that has longer powers.
So, Avery, let's talk about just Jordan being the anti-establishment firebrand that we've been talking about. I mean, he led this effort to overturn the 2020 election. He defied subpoenas that were issued by the January 6th committee to come and testify after that debacle on the Hill. You've got Ken Buck now saying that he thinks Jordan needs to be strong and just come out and say, okay, Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. I'm coming clean. Here's how I really feel. What do you think about that? Would that impact what's going on right now in any way?
I think that would certainly upset the far-right Freedom Caucus end of the Republican Party. Look, the intra-party divisions that are on display for the world to see are not going away. And so it will be, I don't know if it's going to make any difference in terms of these next ballots, but there is a part of the party, a more moderate part of the party, those lawmakers are vulnerable. And so there is going to be a reluctance to signing off on a Speaker Jordan if he still harbors those views.
As he apparently does. He has not affirmed the fact that Joe Biden won the election, and that is an article of faith for that wing of the Republican Party, and he is bringing that to this contest for the speakership. Rick Klein and Avery Harper, thanks very much. Coming up, the president on a mission to show solidarity with Israel and preventing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We've got the latest on Biden's trip to the Middle East next.
Whenever news breaks,
The crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
30 years. My brother's death was this mystery. Was he pushed? Did he kill himself?
There's been some human remains found at the bottom of North Head, and the body was naked.
Committing suicide naked is almost unheard of. What's going on here?
We've had some chilling evidence.
Oh my goodness. No one knew it was coming.
It's about finding justice for my brother.
Sometimes you just have to stir the pot.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yes. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do? Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Glad you're streaming with us. We are now learning that hundreds of people have now died in a strike on a Gaza hospital. This comes as the IDF jets just continue to attack Hamas targets, killing the terror group's head of military intelligence overnight.
Negotiators are also still talking with Hamas about the release of around 200 hostages that are still being held in Gaza. Palestinian and Israeli officials now say around 4,000 people total on both sides have died since the fighting started on October 7th. Let's bring in ABC's Inez de la Cotera. She's in Jerusalem. Inez, what are you learning about this strike on the hospital, and how are things there tonight?
Hey guys, yeah, some devastating news out of Gaza there. We are learning that a hospital was struck. This is the Baptist Baptist hospital in Gaza City, and we are learning at least 200 to 300 people may have been killed in that single strike. The death toll expected to rise. These are people who were likely being treated for injuries related to the war already. We're seeing images emerging now on social media of the hospital in flames, people running around, doctors rushing to get patients out and get patients help, and it's looking like totally devastating situation there. We're seeing reports as well that as many as 5,000 people may have been sheltering in place at that hospital. We've talked about this as the IDF has called for civilians to flee the north of Gaza and Gaza City. A lot of these people have nowhere to go, and so they've been going to places like hospitals and like schools to take shelter, and so it's very likely that there were people sheltering in place at that hospital. We don't know just how many people. We don't know if that's the case, but we are starting to see reports there emerging that people were there looking for shelter and certainly being treated for injuries. We're expecting, again, the death toll to rise, but this could be the deadliest strike of the war so far.
You know, and as targeting a hospital, and Israel does have most of its weapons have guiding systems. It is without justification, unless there was something we don't know about, it would be a war crime. So what are we hearing from Israel about the bombing of a hospital? And what else are we hearing about the Hamas head of military intelligence that they claim to have killed?
Yeah, so when it comes to the hospital, I mean, it's a very new situation. This happened just a few moments ago, so it's very much unclear what happened there. We don't know if it was an IDF strike. We don't know if it was a misfired Hamas rocket. We just don't know at this point. This really happened just moments ago, so we'll see what happens there. But you're right. I mean, the IDF has been relentlessly striking the Gaza Strip, specifically the north of Gaza, and they did take out earlier today the former head of military intelligence there for Hamas. So this is a top Hamas operative, part of the military wing of Hamas, certainly a big get for the IDF. We know this is someone who was responsible in the past for the production and development of weapons. He was responsible for carrying out, according to the IDF, terror attacks on Israeli citizens and on soldiers. And I think most importantly, he was someone who was in charge of figuring out the targets for Hamas rockets. So a big deal. The IDF certainly touting that as a win, guys.
We should point out, too, we're waiting for a Pentagon briefing here back in the U.S., hopefully to get more information possibly on this strike, in addition to the readiness of troops here in the U.S. to possibly head to the Middle East. Meanwhile, let's talk about the looming ground invasion. Inez, are there any signs of when that could happen?
Yeah, still unclear at this point, so we're all kind of waiting here. The IDF certainly says that they are ready, that they are making the final preparations here for this potential ground invasion. We did hear from some IDF officials earlier today that were not necessarily walking back their claims that a ground invasion is imminent, but warning that what may be yet to come could be different than what we expect. So they have said that they are planning a coordinated attack by land, by sea, by air, that would involve a ground incursion into Gaza, but they seem to try and they're seemingly trying to temper maybe expectations there, and they are saying that it might look different than what we expect.
Inez de la Cotera there in Jerusalem for us. Inez, thank you. And coming up, the latest on the security preparations ahead of President Biden's planned trip to Israel. We have more from the White House next.
When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is the King Road Killings. The full series is out now. Listen to every episode wherever you get your podcasts.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
That sounds pretty good.
GMA 3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us.
For everything you need to know. I love that.
From America's #1 news comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and customizable to your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
We're coming to you from the top of Carnarvon Castle in Wales. I'm Maggie Rulli. Whatever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
President Biden is traveling to Israel for high-stakes meetings with Israeli and Arab leaders on Wednesday. He'll aim to show support for the U.S. ally amid concerns that the war with Hamas could spill over across the region.
The president's trip follows a 7-hour marathon meeting between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And then earlier on GMA, George Stephanopoulos actually had a chance to ask the National Security Council spokesman John Kirby if President Biden would urge Israel not to launch a ground invasion into Gaza.
Well, look, we're not getting into dictating operational terms to the Israelis. They have every right to defend themselves and to prosecute Hamas. But that said, George, I mean, since almost the very, very beginning here, we have been talking about how important it is for democracies like Israel and the United States to stand up for the law of war, to respect innocent civilian life, unlike Hamas.
So for more, let's bring in ABC News senior White House correspondent Selena Wang. Selena, you know, a trip like this into a war zone, which presidents take, usually not announced ahead of time, right? We learn or it is disclosed that the president is in Ukraine or Iraq or Afghanistan. Here they are confident, I guess, that Israeli security can secure President Biden. What are they saying about security around this trip?
Well, the U.S. Secret Service is saying that they have an immensely intricate security plan, and that involves discussions with the State Department, with Israeli partners as well, and they're confident that this is going to be okay. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sending the president into Israel. As you said before, typically in trips like this, they are not going to pre-announce it. That's what happened when President Biden had gone to Ukraine earlier this year. But the White House is saying that the threat nature, the security nature of this is different. They said when the president had gone to Ukraine that Russians were regularly bombing with missiles. They were bombarding that area. Now they are saying this threat environment is a bit different, though it is still tense, but they are confident that the president can safely be in Tel Aviv, and later he'll also be traveling to Jordan to meet with other Middle Eastern leaders there.
So in addition to the itinerary, just give us a preview of the president's key goals for this trip.
Well, Kira, this is a pretty big political gamble here. There are major risks to this trip, and the president is trying to walk a very fine line with multiple goals, including, of course, showing that rock-solid support to Israel, trying to work on getting those hostages out, as well as trying to push for a way to ease the humanitarian crisis that's worsening in Gaza by the day. Now, the key priority, of course, is trying to get that Rafah border crossing open. The Secretary of State, he's been there in very intense meetings to try and get it open, but so far, they have been unsuccessful. Egypt is concerned about the security and political implications of allowing so many Gazans in, and they are blaming Israel for the holdup here.
You know, there's tremendous drama in this trip. The president going into the war zone in a Middle East war, trying to support an ally and also restrain Israel at the same time. And at the same time, Pentagon officials are telling ABC News that about 2,000 U.S. troops have been put on a heightened state of readiness for possible deployment to that region, to the Middle East. No decision has been made to send them. But what would those troops be doing? And should Americans be concerned that this is a step the United States is taking towards getting involved?
Well, the really key part, Terry, of President Biden's overall strategy here is sending that message of deterrence and a show of force. And that's how we should look at what you just talked about with these troops. It shows that the U.S. is ready to send additional forces to the Middle Eastern region if needed for deterrence. To be clear, these are not U.S. combat troops. These are U.S. military personnel. They've got a wide range of military capabilities, including intelligence and medical support. But again, not U.S. combat troops. And we've seen the U.S. send this message of deterrence and force in other ways as well. For instance, sending those warships towards the region, those aircraft carriers. And as I said before, he's going to be taking place with other meetings, not just in Tel Aviv, but in Jordan with the leaders of Egypt and Jordan and the Palestinian Authority. The purpose of those meetings, not just to ensure that more aid can be given, but also to prevent this from turning into a wider war.
Selena Wang at the White House for us. Selena, thank you. And thank you for streaming with us. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Moran. ABC News Live is here for you anytime with the latest news, context, and analysis.
And from breaking news to all the stories that matter to you, including continuing coverage on this war against Hamas, you can always find us on Hulu, Roku, the ABC News app, and of course on abcnews.com. The news never stops. We have a lot more ahead on the other side. Stay with us.
Sophie, what up, homie? You got any plans after this?
They seem to be happy, and all of a sudden...
Please say it ain't so.
If you don't hear it from these lips, don't believe it, okay?
There are no accidents in the public eye. Taylor is sending a message, hey, she's on our side.
Divorcing Jonas, Joe and Sophie.
When children are involved, it becomes much more complicated. Very contentious, and then it becomes a mess.
Now streaming on Hulu.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
Everybody in that home is okay.
To catch you up with what happened overnight.
We are here at fashion's biggest night out.
What's happening today? YouTube has unveiled a new set of policies.
What people are talking about. The new ad campaign.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
A real-life Barbie dream house.
A name change for the Wienermobile.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is the King Road Killings. The full series is out now. Listen to every episode.
Today on ABC News Live, Speaker Showdown, a live look at Capitol Hill right now. Congressman Jim Jordan so far does not have the votes to be the next Speaker of the House. 20 Republicans defected from Jordan, more than twice the number McCarthy lost when he was ousted as Speaker. Hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Moran. With the chaos in Congress comes as President Biden plans to visit Israel tomorrow in the wake of Hamas's brutal massacre of Israeli civilians. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tells reporters the president will focus on American solidarity with Israel before meeting with Arab leaders to focus on the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip.
We start on Capitol Hill, of course, with the House of Representatives finishing up its first round of voting for new Speaker. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan coming up short, as we mentioned, despite growing pressure by fellow Republicans. And with a ton of holdouts left.
Yeah, with a lot of holdouts, the House Judiciary Chairman and conservative firebrand Jim Jordan, he's going to need to work much harder to corral the 217 votes he will likely need to become Speaker. That depends on how many people are in the chamber. Let's go to ABC's Jay O'Brien. And Jay, you know, you've been covering this for a while now. What is Jim Jordan's play here?
Yeah, the question really that we're facing now, guys, is what happens next. As you said, the House is in recess. Jordan lost 20 votes. And by sources who were talking to me and talking to our Rachel Scott, the question was what would happen after this. We had talked to sources kind of all morning long who had said that they believe what would happen if Jim Jordan were to lose the first round of balloting, which he now has, is that they would call a conference meeting, a closed-door meeting of essentially all of the House Republicans in which Jordan would try to work work on the holdout votes. We have yet to see a conference meeting called, but the expectation is that there will be one today because Republicans then may want to return back to vote this evening when they get one more Republican who was out for a family emergency back to the floor and their numbers grow ever so slightly. That would be helpful to Jim Jordan because then he could only afford to lose 4 votes as opposed to 3, but he lost 20, guys.
So let's talk about that total of 20 Republicans getting in the way here, shall we say. So why even bring a vote to the floor?
Yeah, well, that's the question. And Jim Jordan now has his opposition essentially on the record. He's got 20 who have said they don't want to vote for him, but there's an ongoing pressure campaign on those 20. The question then becomes if that outside and internal pressure really does work, guys, for the next ballot.
Well, there's strength in numbers. There's 20 of them now. It's not like there's 4 holdouts, 5 holdouts that you can really muscle. There's 20 of them. That's going to be a problem for him. And it also indicates that one of the key skills the speaker has to have is to be able to count votes. And maybe he wasn't. Yeah. So if the number of 55 Republicans or something like that did not support him in the original ballot, what happens with that? They said they'd never vote for Jordan, so he's managed to slice 35 votes out of that, it looks like. What concessions has he been making? What has he got to trade?
Well, that's the open question. That's the question, frankly, we've heard from a lot of Republicans. Is remember, Kevin McCarthy did a lot of horse trading to become the speaker. It took him 15 rounds. He doled out some committee assignments, but those committee assignments are obviously already assigned. He made significant changes to the House Republican rules. He made it easier to oust him as Speaker of the House. He lowered that threshold to 1. But the reality is those rule changes have been made. So what Jim Jordan has to trade with versus what Kevin McCarthy had to trade with is much less. And so the question becomes, how can Jim Jordan move some of these Republicans? We've heard from some Republicans who say they don't like his stance in the 2020 election, not acknowledging President Biden's win. He could potentially move in that direction, but each of these 20 different holdouts have a different thing they want from Jim Jordan, and the math is very complicated for him at this juncture.
So now let's talk about the Dems and how they're seeing this, what that means for them, and what's their strategy.
Well, the Democrats are going to vote against Jim Jordan at every turn. We've heard from some Democrats of the need for a compromise candidate, but Republicans are not going to bite on that. At least that's what they're saying at this juncture. So Democrats are going to continue to really take advantage of this, guys, and use it to bash the possibility of a speakership from Jim Jordan.
All right, Joe O'Brien, standing by in Capitol Hill. You got a long day ahead of you. Thanks very much. For more on this, let's bring in our powerhouse political teams. ABC News Political Director Rick Klein and ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper joins us now. So, Rick, let's talk the big picture here. What do House Republicans do next? How do they get themselves out of a bind that they've really been in since January, that now, you know, that is the label on House Republicans, certainly, which is that they cannot get their act together. How do they get out of this?
Well, in the immediate term, they have to make a choice. Do they try for another House vote, hope that they can twist enough arms to get that number of holdouts down significantly enough that you're moving in the right direction, or if not electing Jim Jordan Speaker overall? Do you try to draft another candidate, seeing if someone else, as yet unnamed, could potentially unify the party? Or do you look for some kind of an exit ramp that allows the business of the House to continue under a more permanent basis with that Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, who can be empowered by a full vote of the House to have additional authorities? It might take some cooperation, though, from Democrats. I think in the bigger picture, to zoom out for a second, the Republicans have shown they cannot, at this stage, govern their own majority in the House of Representatives, and that has real ramifications for the unfolding crises in Israel as well as Ukraine, where there's big funding issues that will be at stake soon, government funding overall about a month from now, the big issues that are on the Republican agenda around border security, around potential impeachment of Joe Biden, all effectively shelved for the time being, and any other world or national crisis, there is not an effective ability to govern around it because 2 weeks in, the Republicans have basically gone backwards. They went from having 8 members who joined with the Democrats to oust McCarthy 2 weeks ago to now having 20 saying they don't like the choice that was put forward by a majority of their colleagues as a replacement.
My goodness.
And Avery, there is so much going on right now. The war in Israel, the war in Ukraine. You've got the deadline for the government shutdown. I mean, crisis so many various crises, internationally and globally. So if indeed Jordan prevails here and becomes Speaker, what's that going to look like?
Right, I do think a Jordan speakership could be a boon to far-right agenda items, but if the part of the Republican Party that has inflicted this chaos on the chamber continues to have sway, it might render the House still paralyzed and unable to get the work of the people done. Like you mentioned, the U.S. is really confronting some major issues as basic as funding the government, but as urgent as dealing with the next steps in the Israel-Hamas war. And so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It sure will. And it is paralyzing the American legislature. The House of Representatives needs to be included, obviously, in any law or bill that gets passed and cannot act. So, Rick, turn to the Democratic side of the ledger here. What do they do with this?
Well, almost lost in this is that every single Democrat showed up and voted for Hakeem Jeffries. It's hard to bring party unity, as I think the Republicans are demonstrating in real time. All 212 of them stuck together. They have quietly floated a couple of different options if there are willing Republican participants. There's a possibility that a small number of Democrats work with all of the Republicans to empower a House Speaker. Remember, you just have to get 217 votes. It doesn't matter where they come from. Certainly, if you're just looking at this as an outsider, there's lots of Democrats that could potentially be in play. Functionally speaking, though, that's very unlikely because of the unity we're seeing right now. More likely is that Democrats, if they are brought into the equation, and it's going to have to be Republicans inviting them in. The Democrats can't force themselves on the majority party. But if they're invited in, you can imagine them negotiating some kind of a deal that empowers them under a temporary power-sharing arrangement with a pro tem speaker that has longer powers.
So, Avery, let's talk about just Jordan being the anti-establishment firebrand that we've been talking about. I mean, he led this effort to overturn the 2020 election. He defied subpoenas that were issued by the January 6th committee to come and testify after that debacle on the Hill. You've got Ken Buck now saying that he thinks Jordan needs to be strong and just come out and say, okay, Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. I'm coming clean. Here's how I really feel. What do you think about that? Would that impact what's going on right now in any way?
I think that would certainly upset the far-right Freedom Caucus end of the Republican Party. Look, the intra-party divisions that are on display for the world to see are not going away. And so it will be, I don't know if it's going to make any difference in terms of these next ballots, but there is a part of the party, a more moderate part of the party, those lawmakers are vulnerable. And so there is going to be a reluctance to signing off on a Speaker Jordan if he still harbors those views.
As he apparently does. He has not affirmed the fact that Joe Biden won the election, and that is an article of faith for that wing of the Republican Party, and he is bringing that to this contest for the speakership. Rick Klein and Avery Harper, thanks very much. Coming up, the president on a mission to show solidarity with Israel and preventing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We've got the latest on Biden's trip to the Middle East next.
From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now. Whenever news breaks.
The crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.